Yep.
What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to our weekly podcasts where we try to answer as many I always do this every time, every question we possibly can, which we are humanly capable of, at least somewhat. So usually how we do this is we go back to back with questions, just trying to get as much information to you as possible, the viewer, in terms of what you can effectively do in bodybuilding to be better, fitness, and in terms maybe longevity too. So we'll get back to it. Adam, we've had a break for a long time. We're just getting back into the swing of things. How are you?
Yeah, man, it's been good. It's been quite some time. I mean, lots of shit happening. You back and deployed yourself to Canada.
Yeah.
I'm still in Thailand. Yeah, a lot of stuff, man, but it's good to be back.
Good stuff for sure. We've been both trepidatiously busy, that's for sure. I think it's like a chronic issue with both of us. Sorry, I'm trying to fix my camera setup here. That we're just too busy for our own good. And I have been struggling with this a lot, which we'll maybe go into a little bit later on the podcast. But it's been tough, man, trying to balance being busy and taking care of other people and then also taking care of yourself. That like differentiation, super hard. Super hard.
Yeah, agreed, dude. Agreed.
Okay, so I'm gonna just with everybody watching right now, I'm gonna go off the questions we have on Instagram, and we'll go from there into any that pop up live as we are doing this. And also, that being said, make sure you do throw in some questions in the comment section right now when you do come up with them. But we got Jimbo Slice asks, "What's your experiences with different GH providers over the years, and how have they tested?" Man, we had a wildly too heated conversation about this in our group chat. We have a private group chat, and all our clients are in it, and they talk about all sorts of shit. And this conversation was just about this exact thing: whether different sources had different concentrations of growth hormone, how many IUs one would have versus the other, down to weighing them on milligram scales. I mean, it got really intense and heated. And I kind of just made a general statement. I think, Adam, you kind of align with this too, but growth hormone is growth hormone, and generics probably just don't. Like, a lot of brands will claim, there's actually one in Canada here, which thank you guys for watching, by the way. A lot of Canadians watching, but everyone uses it, and it comes in, it's a 400 IU kit, and it comes with 10 vials, and they label it as a 400 IU kit because of the vials being overdosed. And someone showed me the vial, and I was like, dude, this is just 10 IUs of growth. Like, there's not an adequate, it's the normal size vial. There's not an adequate amount of lyophilized powder for me to believe that there's more than 3.3 milligrams in there. And at the end of the day, what I just believe it is growth hormone is growth hormone. If you buy a generic, you're probably going to get 10 IUs within that generic. There is better brands that I think have more sophisticated methods of packing and shipping than others. Or maybe the shipment process just isn't as lengthy as others would be, maybe from like a Chinese company. But outside of that, I think you're getting the same product. I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. Like, to be honest, it's quite difficult because I know a lot of the Chinese wholesalers now are doing 10 IU per vial, 15 IU per vial, 36 IU per vial. And it's giving a lot of confusion with some individuals because, correct, sometimes you would weigh the vials, but this is exactly the same. And I think unless you're doing your own verified HPLC testing to, actually verify what the quantum is in there, you're not going to know. Yes, do they do a lot of these labs, ProStone lab results? Yeah, sure. But like, a PDF can easily be faked. And at the same time, I'm not saying it's necessarily not legitimate. I'm just saying no one knows for sure unless you test it yourself. In addition to that, you can also do a proxy sort of test, which you've discussed before, where you're basically looking at your IGF-1 levels, your serum GH levels, 2 hours after injecting on lab work, which can sort of give you an indicator. If you injected supposedly, a full vial, which is supposedly 36 IU, and your IGF-1 and serum GH is only like slightly elevated, or shit, it's probably not 36 IU.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. Like, it really could be either, which is why I always say to people, test. If you can HPLC testing, do that. If you can do your lab work and sort of do that as a proxy, do that. Because correct, there's a very good chance a lot of them is like 10 IUs or even less.
Yeah, that's a test. It's so funny because the further we really get into this, the more I find myself saying, well, it depends. And it's like, well, it's, something or another, right? I had a person ask me, they had heavy menstrual cycles, and they're having a lot heavier ones than normal. And they had asked me on Instagram, why that was. And it's like something that ambiguous is impossible to give you an answer. I mean, it could be an iron deficiency. It could be that you have, lack of progesterone limiting your luteum development. Like there's so much information that could be wrong, right? And so like the same thing is true with growth hormone. There's could be so much that we could say, but none of it's true unless it's true for you. And that's the hardest part about this game, is like, we can't read your minds, unfortunately, and nor do we have you as a person to view through or anything, right? It makes it so much harder. Okay, moving on. The next question's from Aaron, our homie in Bangkok. How do you approach a mid-prep diet break? What to look for to time it just right? Adam, you're pretty good at this.
Yeah, so I typically, it really depends on the individual. Like there's a huge individual variance in this, where I've had individuals who I've done a prep, they did a full 16-20 week preps, no slowdown in fat loss. Fat was just falling off every week. In fact, one of my clients right now, shout out to Preston, man doesn't need a diet break. He's lost consistently 1 to 1.25% every week. However, I've noticed with some females, some other individuals, fat loss seems to stall out and fatigue gets super high. So much so that when I found that we're quite far out and, step count is super high, expenditure super high, they're getting quite fatigued, and I see a regression in training performance, and we still have time, that's typically when I would initiate a diet break. It really depends on the contest prep timeline, which is why I like people having longer contest preps. So I like to look at how much fat do we have to lose. Can we account for 1 or 2 deloads? Can we account for diet break? Can we account for a week of fucking up? That's how I mitigate that. But to actually do the diet break, it depends what variables need to be adjusted. So, for instance, if expenditure in terms of steps and cardio is not very high, why won't we adjust that? But if they are doing like 20,000 steps or 18,000 steps and a fair bit of cardio, and that's really fatiguing them, I'll reduce cardio, maybe keep food the same. If food is super low, I'll bring them up to what we perceive as the new maintenance levels and keep that for 1 to 2 weeks. It really depends on the timeline. Like, I hate to give a "it depends" answer, but it really does, based on your levels of fatigue and also the prep timeline. Like, can we afford to take a diet break? Yes or no? But yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And this is actually tying in perfectly to the things I want to talk to you about later on. But so I have this show I want to do in November. And it was like, again, like we were talking about at the beginning of this, I'm really busy. So for me, it's like, stupid is easiest. I'll just go with like what I know best and use brute force. And for me, like this is also where everyone's different, right? Using calories as a number to dictate whether you need a refeed isn't appropriate, because everyone's different. For me, like my prep, the last one I did, where I had like shredded glutes, I was eating 3,600 calories. When I got shredded glutes, when I had them, that now is like murdering me. Like I am falling apart. My body feels heavy. For the first time in probably 9 months, my triceps are sore. Like I've never had tricep soreness, and my training certainly hasn't changed. In fact, it's regressed. And those are kind of the things I look for when talking about a refeed diet break, or even a deload in conjunction with those two things, is like, is the person feeling this exhaustion that's almost unbearably like where you get out of bed and it's like, holy fuck, like I can barely lift my left leg up to like roll out of bed to just make it through the day, and you need 6 cups of coffee just to like push you through the first 6 hours of the day. That's really where I'm like, okay, like you might not need to be, you very well could need this, but there's also a very high probability that you don't have to be suffering that much. You and I have both gotten extremely lean. For me, I know for a matter of fact that I don't have to suffer that bad. I don't have to get to that point to get really shredded. And I think most people are probably the same. And if you start to feel that sort of heaviness and sort of this, like you said, regression in training and just being an effective human being, oftentimes that's right when a deload is needed or a refeed is needed. When cognitive function starts to slow down, attitude starts to regress, mood starts to become sort of more temperamental, but in a much more volatile way. Those are the things I'm looking for most often. I think in conjunction with some of the things you mentioned, it's like the perfect storm kind of.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with that. I mean, if actually, funny that you mentioned that, actually when an athlete doing a prep does need a deload, like you said, fatigue is super high, train performance is regression, that's typically when I actually do try to sync up a deload and diet break in conjunction with each other. And that seems to work quite well, because with all of these athletes that I prep, what I try to look for is to try and ensure that the entire time there's almost no regression training performance, where I've got athletes currently now who are 4 or 5 weeks out and their training hasn't regressed yet. Yes, there'll probably be a point at 3, maybe 2 weeks out where it's just maintenance mode, like we're just matching reps, we're matching load, and there's no progression there. But shit, we got all the way to 2 weeks out. So if you're like 8 weeks out, if you're 10 weeks out, and there's been significant drops in your training performance, in other words, reps, load, even volume you can handle, you're probably pushing it too fast and too hard, in which case a deload / diet break may be appropriate. And if you can maintain that performance all the way out to like 3 weeks out, I think you've done a really good job of maintaining your lean mass.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah. Okay. Aaron asked a couple questions. Thoughts on these broccoli head boys posting training videos covered in acne because they know it. Engagement. I don't know if you've seen this kind of content where
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, like they'll turn up the sharpness and they'll kind of expose their really bad acne development and or scarring for engagement. I think it's gross. It isn't pretty. It's not attractive, but I think it gets views because it's easy to make fun of. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the kid everyone pointed fingers at on the courtyard kind of thing. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. I genuinely think it's, especially when you live in a world of like shock and controversy and like go viral almost by any means, I think. And I do think these guys know that they look horrible. I do think these guys know they're full of acne and are just posting it for the views. I mean, funny you mentioned, I literally saw a dude yesterday, because I think everyone that I know will follow is like commenting on it. So he obviously gets recommended to me. And like some 17-year-old kid, like with gynecomastia, acne, a very horrible, looking physique, I hate to say. And I think it's just sad, because it's like you're always going to be people who do dumb shit. And I think that the internet just magnifies that. It's just dumb shit. That's all I can say. It's just dumb.
No, 1000%. Yeah, it sucks. It really does. And it's the same thing with like the sort of Gen Zers posting a lot of like Gen Z or bodybuilders posting a lot of content about them like pinning in the bathroom of an airplane trend, for example. It's like that kind of shit it's just there for publicity. It's not necessarily, I don't know. It's a really crappy environment that's arguably probably the worst generation of bodybuilding we've had thus far, to be fair. We have one of the Canadians actually that's been helping me out here. Eli asks, when would you consider adding insulin to a competitive stack? And I think both you and I are quite bullish on peptides, but I'd like to hear maybe your stance on insulin in particular.
Yep. So when you need competitive stack, I'm just going to take that as a stack. Because typically in a contest prep phase, like we would be pulling at least a long-acting insulin quite early on, depending on their fasting glucose levels. But the way I typically approach insulin is I've sort of changed my perspective a little bit on it, where previously I was like, oh, I can use Lantus right off the get-go. Like you need it, chuck it in. Whereas I've sort of shifted it to now, no, I think it's more of an as-needed drug. And what I mean by that, and it's also I sort of treat short-acting and long-acting differently, but let me talk about long-acting.
Yeah.
So when it comes to long-acting, I basically do it on an as-needed basis. Like, for instance, is your pancreas producing enough endogenous insulin to keep your fasting glucose in range based on your carbohydrate intake? So what I would typically do is look at an athlete, get their fasting glucose levels over the course of a week. And if it's in a range, typically we consider it a range about like 70 to 90, I think it's nanograms per milliliter, I believe. So unit of measurement, well, you know what the unit of measurement is. Anyway, if it's within the optimal range, okay, then I don't actually use it because the insulin sensitivity is good. You can also do other blood work like serum IR, home IR to see serum insulin, and home IR to see that, but not a lot of people are going to do that. So we base it off their fasting glucose. If we see their fasting glucose start creeping out of range, that's when I'll deploy like maybe a glucose disposal agent, berberine, suppressamax, shut on first attachment, metformin, any sort of glucose disposal agent I can use. That usually will hold off for a period of time until carbohydrates are then even higher, in which case it's starting out of range. At that point, I would deploy Lantus. basically on training days when the carbohydrates typically is higher, because we typically do a carbohydrate cycling approach, training days and high days, to then keep fasting glucose in range. And then what I do is I basically keep adjusting the dose based on where their fasting glucose is to keep it in the optimal range. Like, obviously, this is, in conjunction with doing cardio, having a good diet. It's not just like use Lantus and basically, be a shithead and not do anything else, which helps improve insulin sensitivity.
Yeah.
But basically use it as need to keep insulin sensitivity, because I previously thought, insulin definitely is an anabolic compound, but I do think it's more as needed. Whereas a Humalog is short acting, I use that more around the post-workout window to drive nutrients, as well as improve workout performance. So Humalog, I think, will improve muscle pumps, will improve muscle endurance, so much so that I notice the difference when I don't use a short acting in my training. I simply just have less stamina, so to speak, in my training, and I might get not as much performance out of it. So that's simply the way I approach it. I know a lot of people like to throw it in right from the beginning, but then my question is, well, what is the function of insulin? And if you're producing enough of it, why do you need more?
That's 100%. Yeah, and I think so I'm very similar to you in the sense that I've changed my opinion on it. Again, I used to be heavily bullish with using Lantus specifically as soon as possible. The data is pretty good. It suggests that there is, marginal to significant increases in serum IGF-1 levels when someone takes Lantus, which sounds really favorable. But what I began to see with at least a handful of clients, this isn't everybody, and it's not myself, certainly it wasn't my own experience, but with a handful of clients, the negative feedback loop of insulin being thrown in started to just derange blood glucose further. So their off seasons get to a point where even using 50, 60 IUs of Lantus at some points, there would be a 90 milligram per deciliter, almost 100 milligram per deciliter blood glucose in a fasting state, which is very abnormal. And so my, approach has now kind of been maybe not using Lantus unless it's, like you kind of mentioned, needed. It's not necessarily a prophylactic as much as it is, hey man, blood glucose is out of range. We're doing all the prerequisites to keep it in range. It's still sticking there. Let's deploy some Lantus. And then it sort of really modulates that blood glucose and keeps it down into a safer range. And I think it's really important to touch on, why would you want to keep your blood glucose low? Well, because high blood glucose is going to cause direct vascular damage and damage to capillaries, which is going to obviously cause long-term health complications we don't want. But then sort of now I think I'm more bullish on short-acting insulin or peri-workout, which I've always been, but to a point where it's like, all right, let's try to use the window of time we have as an opportunity, and do a pre-workout dose of short-acting insulin to drive like intra-workout cascades for anti-catabolism, as well as like motor learning and stuff of that nature. Post-workout to drive the hyper compensation or hyper what would you say, glycogen synthesis rates. It's a
compensation muscle action,
right. Your GLUT4 regulation is upregulated. So if you inject insulin and then you have IR binding and then GLUT4 upregulation, you just suck in a ton of nutrients, not just carbohydrates, but amino acids and fatty acids. And that actively, promotes mTOR, which I think is highly beneficial. And, I will say that I used to do it a lot pre-aerobic work, like pre-cardiovascular training, to accelerate like lipolysis just through limiting total blood glucose. But I definitely don't do that anymore. That's not something I do anymore, and I don't think it actually has that much of a benefit. Roman Fritz, very bullish on that. He does that 2 to 5 IUs fasted in the morning. But he's a psychopath and he likes to go hypo, and he thinks that's like him working. So it's his psychology, but he's not like everybody else. So I would say for most people, you can, if your shit is dialed in to a T, you have your nutrition on point, you have your training on point, everything's timed out quite appropriately. I think where you're going to best benefit from an addition of insulin would be short-acting insulin, peri-workout, pre and post-workout. The rest of the day, you should be, if all things are correct, pretty well managed in terms of like your glycemic variability, and you probably don't need Lantus for quite some time until you're really approaching a point where you need 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day to sustain the size you're at. And then that's a debatable topic. But if you're 180 to 220 pounds, you know, it's hard to even need that many carbohydrates to support yourself, and your body can handle those pretty well, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Like people, you know, think that, oh, like, you know, an enhanced bodybuilder, read the safer use model or something along those lines. I need to use insulin like right off the bat. And it's like, no, you don't, bro. You're growing on like 300 grams of carbs, like fucking relax. Like your pancreas can produce more about that. And also, sorry, one thing with the pre and post workout window, I just want to say with the post workout dosing, test your fasting glucose, because there's a good chance that if you're quite lean already, you're going to be very insulin sensitive and you're just going to go hyper if you take that post workout dose immediately. You might need to have your post workout meal, test it an hour or two after that, and then maybe take a second short-acting insulin dose with the meal after your post-workout meal, depending where it's at. You know, if you're in an off-season phase, you might require it, but just do everything based off your blood glucose. Because I know I get a lot of guys who'll be like, oh, I took my pre-workout insulin, I trained for an hour, and then I took post-workout, I went hyper. It's like, yeah, dude, because the acting life is like 3 to 5 hours, and you probably would have burned through a whole bunch of glycogen and load your blood glucose anyway. You don't need to take like a second 5 to 10 IU dose post-workout, especially if your workout was like an hour and it wasn't that long. So, just bear that in mind.
Yeah. And I'd say for a lot of people, when you are in a position where your carbohydrates are low, you have to realize you burn, like an average human being burns something like, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but it's estimated to be like 300 some, maybe you know this, like 300 grams of glycogen or something like that. Is some, I think it was actually like, the average male holds 850 grams of glycogen.
Yes. It was around a kilo, if I remember.
Yeah. And then there's some data out there that suggests over a 60-minute training window that you lose some proportionate amount of that. I can't remember exactly, but theoretically, let's just say you're eating enough to sustain the glycogen that you lost during the training bout. You probably don't need insulin post training, especially in a situation where you are really lean, because you're just filling up what you've lost, and you're so in need of that carbohydrate, you're so in need of that nutrients, that it's like your insulin sensitivity, you're just going to absorb it and it's going to go right into the muscle where it can only go because you need it. It's a prerequisite. And then in that case, it's like insulin's just kind of overkill and you kind of blow your shit out of the water. And that's not fun either. I hate going hypo, man. It's the worst fucking feeling in the world, to be honest.
Yes, it's shit.
It's not fun. It's not fun. Okay, so kind of two questions that are very similar from two different people. So Dalton MKs asks, are there compounds that can help you stay asleep while on gear? I'm extremely prone to insomnia. We'll start there.
Yes, quite a few. So the question is, see, I would reverse engineer. So I'd be like, okay, what is stopping you from sleeping? Because what compounds specifically are stopping you from sleep? Because if you're telling me, oh yeah, I'm running a 19 or specifically Trenbolone, I would say, well, are you in a contest prep? Are you at the end of the contest prep? How are you running? What gear are you taking? Because it's not that I don't want to answer this question. I will. Okay, but the point I'm trying to make is, so many people take a drug which causes a negative side effect, and they try to take another drug to counteract that side effect. But my question is, like, what is the necessity of that drug? And the reason I ask is because most individuals I know in an off-season phase, obviously there are unique people who have, you know, unique results or unique side effects sometimes. But most individuals, when they're taking things like a Primobola and a Masteron, an Equipoise, a testosterone, sleep is not affected. It's usually when you're taking something like an Nandrolone, a Trenbolone, Ment, Tressolone, you know, something along those lines where sleep is disrupted. And then my question is, what benefit are you getting out of these drugs which is worth mitigating your sleep? So that's just something to think about. But in terms of improving your sleep, man, it's a whole host of shit. Like just growth hormone, I find personally is best bang for your buck in terms of improving REM sleep, improving deep sleep. There's a multitude of other peptides. Just from a supplementation side of things, you can use things like GABA, 5-HTP, ashwagandha, melatonin. The list goes on. I mean, I think I don't need to keep plugging them, but like your First Attachment makes a great all-round sleep supplement, which combines all this stuff. I only say it because I generally do use it and like it. So there's a lot of things you can do, and I know this is really overrated, but like sleep hygiene, like getting yourself a CPAP if you are large enough and you need it. There's a lot of stuff to do there. So it's hard because it really depends answer, because you could take this whole spectrum of supplementation, peptides, growth hormone, and it could do fuck all to your sleep if your sleep is being, you know, disrupted because you're just very sensitive to Trenbolone and even a dose of 35 milligrams a week, you're having sleep disruptions. So I would have to know, like, what are you currently taking? Is it, is it the REM sleep that's being disrupted? You wake up, or is it sleep duration that's being affected? So yeah, but to give you a broad spectrum answer, dude, like GH, melatonin, 5-HTP, GABA, I would say CBD oil I actually find works quite well for myself as well. Just make sure it's got no THC, zero THC, just pure CBD. I've actually been using that quite recently, and it works well. So you don't get high from it, but it helps I find relax myself. Could be placebo because I do take a multitude of other things. That's typically my answer. I mean, I think, Kolton, you spoke about last time, a specific peptide which escapes me, which actually helps with sleep. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. Oh my God. I forget what I think it was PT151 or something. There's a handful of them that we're talking about. Yeah. I will say, all those things are great. And you actually, when I was more directly coaching you, you had mentioned that one of the things you do that's really important for you is allocate carbohydrate. Even if you're training earlier in the day, you're allocating carbohydrates for that later evening window.
Yes.
You have sleepwalking issues horribly. So those later evening carbohydrates would help you kind of stay asleep and stuff. And there's some truth to that. Insulin is a very potent CNS suppressant. So you're calming down the central nervous system. And I think, a lot of people are afraid of moving carbohydrates away from the workout. But if you can put just, a moderate amount of carbohydrates in that evening window right before bed, you can actually, as long as it's not an exorbitant amount and, it increases the thermogenic rate and you get really hot, it can actually really help you go to sleep. And I've found that for myself, at least, to be extremely true. Something so simple as that. And then on top of this, the other thing that I love to use for myself, especially like coming here, right? I'm fully functioning. I'm fully in the sleep cycle. It only took me one day. Obviously, like, it's still disrupted. I was waking up too early and stuff. It's a 14-hour time shift from Thailand. But I would use Trazodone. Trazodone is an anti-anxiety medication, but it is the only medication that's approved for use for sleeping disorders and doesn't just make you go unconscious. It's not a sedative, it's an antidepressant. And specifically, it's been shown to improve sleep architecture. So it doesn't just help you sleep by making you sort of more sort of tired and less awake in terms of like your nervous system, but it also improves rates of slow wave sleep and REM sleep. So it's something super favorable for me. I don't use it long term at all. It's just something like for these, for initial 2 to 3 days of being here, I would take it, therefore aligning sort of my circadian rhythm more quickly and abruptly with Canada's time zone. So, and that helps tremendously. I think it's one of the best things you can take if you need to pull that pharmaceutical trigger. I don't think most people do, unless calories are extremely low and you're at the last, your last nut hair of a prep, then you probably can't do that. But I think you can really use carbohydrates and growth hormone, especially, to leverage some good sleep.
Actually, there is one which I've actually used before indirectly, is actually antihistamines. So I find most make me extremely drowsy and help me sleep. So I actually found this because I was getting rashes in Thailand from God knows what. And I was taking a lot of antihistamines. And I was like, holy shit, these make me fall asleep really easily. Now, I perfectly don't prefer pharmacological interventions, but I personally think the side effects from an antihistamine are way less than actual heavy sleep medications, which are sedatives. So if you really are struggling to contest prep and you can't sleep, I would try a low-dose antihistamine and see, as long as you don't have any other negative interactions with it, that could be a potential option. But like I say, really, when it comes to sleep, try to find what the cause is and address that instead of just being like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to take some more medication to sleep.
Yeah. 1,000%. No, like that. That's pretty good, man. Maybe we should cut that into its own YouTube video because I get asked that question a lot, to be honest. About like,
should we answer some of the guys in chat? Sorry,
sorry, I keep going on the Instagram journey. All right, so let's go to Nick P. As of late, Enclomifene being prescribed, especially when fertility is a concern for low T. If someone has low T, wouldn't it be potentially better to utilize tests and HCG until fertility is not a concern? Until I would say, if I'm understanding you correctly, basically you're asking, as opposed to Enclomifene for low testosterone, wouldn't testosterone and HCG be more effective if immediately you're not trying to get pregnant? you're 1,000% right. And even if you're trying to get pregnant, testosterone and HCG will get someone pregnant for sure, hands down. Speaking from working with hundreds of clients and having multiple people, and I've shared it in the group chat every time like a person has a baby, I've never had a person or a client not have a child or conceive a child when they weren't on cycle yet. So every time someone's had a child, they've been on cycle. So I think if that answers your question, maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but
yeah, funny you mentioned this one. I can't actually say who the client is because they need to wait to the 8-week mark. But one of my clients, we literally conceived. But the way we set it up, right, was because he was previously natural and wanted to basically go down the enhanced route. I said, okay, well, to make this a lot quicker and easier, let's do a fertility protocol in the beginning before we actually use the testosterone. It literally took, it was actually super quick. I think it was the second month. So the second ovulation phase, and his wife got pregnant. I was like, shit, I was even quicker than expected. Yeah, and that was literally using a protocol of a little bit of Enclomifene, HCG, and that's actually all we needed. That really boosted fertility parameters. But to try to dissect your question here, man. So as of late, Enclomifene was prescribed, especially when fertility is a concern for low T. So I think what you're trying to say is, you have low T, but you're concerned about keeping your fertility and you're worried if testosterone would degrade that. So my question is, it depends when you want to get pregnant. So if you're going to be blasting testosterone for multiple years and high amounts, probably is going to affect fertility. Could you still get pregnant on that testosterone? Yeah, I believe so. As Kolton said, like it's happened to many clients on cycle. It depends when you want to get pregnant and depends on how long you want to maintain said fertility for. Because if you're going to get want to get have a child in, I don't know, let's say 5 to 10 years, well, shit, man. You can't really see screws on Enclomifene then if you want to be a serious bodybuilder. So what I recommend in that circumstances, use testosterone. I actually advise using against HCG because I think it's expensive and adds more complications around aromatization. Okay. And rather save that for when you do want to, have a child, in which case you can either deploy a fertility protocol whilst dropping to TRT or completely PCT or restore endogenous testosterone supply and improve fertility. Depends on your individual needs. I've had most people are actually dropping to TRT and doing a fertility protocol. I found in my experience of going pregnant, I actually haven't had to have anyone PCT off except one guy because he wanted to, not because it was even needed. But in terms of, but then let's say you want to get pregnant in a year's time, but you also want to make serious progress. I think then there might be a use case for testosterone and HCG. But just remember, using HCG is going to increase aromatization quite drastically in most individuals and might making controlling estradiol a little bit hard. You're also sending multiple signals to your pituitary gland, which, again, this is a bit of extrapolated bro science here, but like I would be hesitant, signaling your pituitary gland with HCG, then using exogenous testosterone, and then even like maybe throwing a DHT derivative to then control estradiol or what they are. Like you're just making quite a concoction there. So I'd rather have a set time frame and then design your cycle or your PDs around that.
Yeah, and it can make polypharmacy an interesting complication when you're dealing with that many different pathways. I think one thing that I've noticed, if anything, when people are taking both testosterone and HCG and other things, is that estradiol becomes wildly much harder to control. It starts to get extremely volatile because you start producing more intratesticular testosterone and there's aromatase enzyme localized there. And so you just start converting this testosterone into estrogen. And the thing about HCG is that its half-life and effective life is very minimal acute compared to testosterone, obviously. So you have these huge blasts of like intratesticular testosterone production and then a subsequent conversion to estrogen. And that can be a bit difficult to manage, especially if someone's on 6 different compounds and you're trying to figure out what the fuck to do about this estrogen. And it becomes an equation like you were mentioning to use a drug to fix a drug's effects on your body. For sure. Okay, so guys, ask questions. There's been like up to 25 of you in here and no one's asked questions. Okay, what all right. What is your current cycle and why? So currently, as of and then you can dive into yours because I think that's only fair. Currently, as of getting to Canada and probably 6 weeks prior, I had, I came off of a cycle which was 750 milligrams of testosterone and then 1,200 milligrams of equipoise. and then as much growth hormone as I could remember to inject a day, which ended up being quite a bit. It's just the worst fucking cycles for me right now. Then I stopped injecting. To be honest, completely just foregone injecting anything, especially when having to pack everything up from Thailand and then move it all to a different country and dealing with immigrations and everything like that. The last thing I wanted to do is have like a bunch of drugs on my bag and stuff like that. And I was able to bring a lot into Canada. I don't think they care too much because it's obviously not a classified drug here, but I didn't want to make any more complications with the Thai government in specific. So to be honest, I've been running maybe what would equate to about 100 milligrams a week for the past 6-ish weeks. Obviously equipoise is still going to be in my serum and it's going to be for some time still, but that has been the current cycle. I just am about to put in an order here to get everything I need to actually engage in this prep, from testosterone, Masteron, Trenbolone, Winstrol, and growth hormone. If I didn't say that already. So
yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, mine is kind of the opposite. Well, not the opposite of that. It's the same with that. I just injected it. So I'm currently using a combination of testosterone and equipoise. My testosterone is quite low, surprisingly. It's 375 milligrams per week, because I found that above that, I was aromatizing a fair bit much that I need to take an AI. And so I found with myself AI dosing quite difficult in the sense that I usually either under or overdo it. It means almost never find my rhythm with that. Yeah. So I prefer to use a compound, in this case, equipoise, it being my less aromatizing compound, where I'm using currently about 1,000 milligrams. So the total cycle is about 1.3 or 1.4 total milligrams. And I found that on my recent blood work, that is the ratio that where my estradiol, I think it was sitting at about 29, and I feel great on that, which is quite surprising. I thought it'd be quite elevated. But yeah, that's currently what I'm using and what I'm growing on. Surprisingly, hematocrits and red blood cell count is also in range. My last blood work, I just need to actually compile it. I actually send it to you, dude. I just haven't, because they send you like 6 different emails and like at different times. So I need to go through, compile it, put it on PDF. It's fucking painful. But I did read each email as it came through. I was like, okay. I checked my blood clotting factors, D-DAMA, and the rest of them. They're actually all fine too. Which makes me start questioning, am I actually even taking equipoise? Which makes me think, I don't know. It's like fucking, I always get skeptical about it because I'm like, I've never used equipoise before with my hematocrit wasn't at least slightly elevated. It's well within range. I think it's like 51 or some shit. So I'm like,
look,
okay.
I experienced the same problem while I was there, okay? And I don't know, it just seems to be the UGL scene in Thailand, man. But I was taking the most gear I've ever taken, and I was eating a ton of food, and I had nothing to do but work and train. I wasn't like being an entire bodybuilder during that time. I will admit it. I still fucked off in terms of bodybuilding, like training focus and intensity that you need, kind of like per session wasn't happening as well as it normally was. But I was following, training program that you wrote for me to the T. I was eating a diet to the T day after day. It was more sort of like intuitive eating, but in a sense it wasn't intuitive eating. It was just like I didn't measure shit. I just knew like, okay, I put
you have the same meals every day.
Yeah, exactly. I just put this many. When you know what you eat, you know what you eat. It's just like and then it's like shocking to me that I didn't bust above 242 or in pounds when I've been 260 before on 800 milligrams of gear. So I don't know, man. I didn't think it was legit either. That's the reason I kind of stopped it too, is like, what am I getting out of this? Like, I'm literally not gaining any weight and I'm eating more food, and it's just interesting to me, but I don't know.
Funny you mention that, because my total prior highest peak dose ever was 900 milligrams. And look, this is based on my own perception, so take this with a bucket of salt, guys. But I was like, fuck, this feels wild. Like 900 milligrams feels like a lot. I know there's some that might feel something might seem like a little bit. For some people, that might seem like a lot. But personally, when I was on like 900 milligrams, I was like, fuck, this is a lot. I don't feel shit. I'm currently at 1.4 grams. Like I don't feel crazy strong in the gym. The blood work looks good. So that's correct. So I sort of agree with you. I'm very skeptical, in which case I'll probably end up doing like a mini cut sometime soon, pull out all the equipoise. Obviously, as you said, it'll be in serum for quite some time, and probably switch to a different compound and or supplier. Like I know the bad testosterone, because they come in bad testosterone ampoules, is real. That is real.
Right.
But aside from the other UGL compounds, yeah, your guess is as good as mine. And unfortunately, HPLC testing here, I haven't found a lab yet which does it. So I'm gonna have to try to find something which is guaranteed, because yeah, it's a bit underwhelming what I'm currently on. And then also to finish what I'm currently taking growth hormone. I've dropped it for IU because I've been spending a metric shit ton on the local stuff here. So I need to do a generic import order, in which case I'll probably up it. So I've only been running like 4 IUs at the current point in time. Ancillaries, Talmasartan at the moment. I've started taking a little bit of Nibivlol because my resting heart rate seems to run higher, and I think that's for me because I have a specific genetic disorder called thalassemia. Without me going on a long fucking tangent here, it just means my red blood cells are less efficient at carrying oxygen. So usually it results in elevation of resting heart rate, despite me doing a fair bit of cardio. So for me, fuck my camera. For me, I'm taking a little bit of Nibivlol, 5 milligrams. And oh yeah, and actually, I found that my blood glucose is in range that I've actually not needed Lantus, surprisingly, at the current point in time. So that's been quite interesting too. I haven't been using Lantus for quite some time now, but weight's still holding steady at 122 kilos, which is 269 pounds, I think.
Yeah, you look massive.
Still fucking fat, bro. And a bit of Humalog, and that's pretty much it, man. I'm just trying to keep it as I just try, like I always say to people, I'm trying to get as little side effects as possible, because I generally think that can make or break your progress. Like fuck, I could throw in like 4 different compounds, escalate doses a fair bit, but if I'm like a walking side effect and I feel horrible, and my training's horrible, and I can't get down food, what's the point?
Right.
I'm not going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And with the blood work, you had mentioned that earlier, how it comes in different PDFs. I actually went to the hospital. Like the hospital was probably like 6 weeks before. It was more so for my leg, but they wanted to pull labs, and I was like, cool, I need to do that. And it's like, yeah, like you said, every single result came in on a different email. I was like, dude, what the fuck? This is so shit. Yeah. But anyways, basically we could be taking fake gear. I had, dude, crazy shit. I gotta say, Canada's been great for a couple reasons. It's been horrible for another thing. Side tangent here. It's been horrible because everything is so fucking expensive. To include gear, growth hormone is just outrageously expensive here. For a kit, for a singular kit, an underground lab, 100 IU kit, it's 400 CAD. That's like the going price for. Yeah,
that's Australian pricing.
it's like, dude, what? Like, that's stupid as shit. Anyways, a lot of good people here have helped me out. Someone, one of the people here who apparently watches my content, who's one of the guys who works, in the manufacturing industry here, sent me a ton of stuff, which I'm super thankful for. But I do notably feel a bit different already. And I would say that when I was on the previous cycle before that, which was my post-show cycle, kind of continued for an extremely long time, I would walk around feeling full. You know what I mean? And I would walk around like my chest would feel swollen, my arms would feel swollen, like everything just kind of felt swollen as I move around in a good way. And I didn't get that there. And I could never really put my finger on it if it was me focusing too much on other sports or eating inappropriate timing or not using, exorbitant amounts of insulin or anything. But I don't know. Anyways, tangent done. I don't know if we're taking real gear. So thoughts on the pros and cons of using test and mast during a fat loss phase versus just using test in a TRT dose.
Pros and cons.
So
I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I think what you're trying to approach this with, which is smart, is that I know I'm not going to be able to build a ton of muscle in a fat loss phase. So why would I increase the doses of androgens? But, and that there's logic behind that. But for most people, I would argue that if you are already within striking distance of, 12% body fat, using more androgens is going to benefit you because it's going to conserve more muscle tissue more of the time, as well as decrease what we were just talking about before this, the immediacy of overtraining with caloric restriction. You can push past a lot of the bullshit that normal people would experience when in a caloric deficit just because you're on gear. And that benefit alone helps you conserve so much more muscle tissue, as well as maintain fullness that keeps that muscle looking really good and not just like a natty guy in a t-shirt. Like you actually look like a bodybuilder. You can do TRT. There's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, for some people, if they're in a fat loss phase and they are arguably not close to 12% body fat, fuck, we still have tons of body fat to go that is going to be partitionable, and we're not losing any muscle anytime soon. So saving the cycle for when things are getting a little bit more dire, body fat's getting a little bit more lesser, and there's less to pull from in that regard, then that's where a higher dose of androgens could come in. But the cons to using higher doses, there's really not many. I mean, it would be hard for me to come up with anything that would actually be non-pro in terms of fat loss with more androgens. Maybe you have some, I don't know.
Yeah, so the thing that I always ask is, how big are you? Because question is, right, when in a fat loss phase, and depending on how lean you want to get, because there's a difference between a regular fat loss phase and just getting contest prep lean. So I'll address both. If you're on a regular fat loss phase and you're not that big, like, fuck, I'm going to throw out some numbers here. It depends on your heart. So it's actually hard for me to answer. Let's just say, I don't know, you are not a pro level bodybuilder. So someone who's just an amateur with a decent amount of muscle mass on you. You could probably get away during a regular 12-week fat loss phase on a contest prep on TRT doses, because you don't need that high level of anabolics to actually retain muscle mass. Then on the other hand, if you're doing a fat loss phase and you are like fucking 250 pounds plus lean, shit, you might need a bit more than TRT to retain that tissue. It's just in general, you might need more than TRT. I mean, a lot of the guys, even though they don't disclose it, their cruise dose, TRT, is like 750 milligrams of test. I'm not saying they necessarily need that, but you have to realize the bigger you are, the more you're going to need to maintain said tissue. Okay. And I think Paul even spoke about where he did a cruise on like 125 milligrams of test. And he said, correct me if I'm wrong, that he regretted it because he thought he got a bit softer, lost a bit of muscle. And that's understandable. Paul's fucking huge. So that amount, I would sort of expect that. Now, looking at a contest prep phase, as Kolton said, you typically want to titrate androgens, okay, to maintain training performance, ensure that we're not getting a level, in sort of muscle catabolism, which some bit is inevitable if you're actually getting peeled. And again, that's going to depend on how large you are. So if you are a large individual, you're not going to do contest prep on TRT, retain all your training performance, retain all your tissue. You're going to have to use more compounds, in which case you probably will have to use a DHT derivative to control estradiol, depending on how much you aromatize. So I guess the question, the way I'm trying to answer it is, depends how much you need, man. Depends how big you are. Previously, have I ever got really lean using just TRT in a cut? Yeah, but I was also like 220 pounds. Now, if I were to use just like true TRT, like 125 milligrams, 100 milligrams of testosterone a week in a cut, shit, dude, I don't think I would, and I got actually lean, I don't think I would retain all of the tissue. So I would have to make that dose appropriate to what I need. So yeah, to answer your question, man, you kind of got to use as much as you need. If you're a bigger guy, you're probably going to need something like testosterone and a DHT derivative, probably.
Yeah, you said something so perfectly there. If you're looking to, there's kind of an equation, right? And when you're natural, the equation is when you're trying to lose fat, you eat less and move more. The equation when you're not natural is eat less, move more, and then as training performance degrades because you're eating less, implement more drugs. And I think it's less of the drugs that's giving people an exorbitant, huge physique, but rather it's what they do in terms of like training efficacy and nutrient partitionability so that you can continue to eat more when you need to eat less, as well as train better when you normally would be suffering quite a bit, therefore increasing expenditure altogether. So yeah, I think that's like a perfect framework. Nick P asks, Kolton after Canada, where's next? Me and Adam have talked about this a lot, actually. I think, I've been doing some research into the Europa area, like, all over, man, like Serbia, Croatia, Albania, Romania. Those are some places I really want to take a glance at and see how they would be living. Adam, you said you named a few, and I was starting to research one. Portugal, I started to research. It looks really favorable, not gonna lie. And I thought, oh fuck, like here's another Thailand with the temperature, but not at all. The temperature isn't nearly as bad as Thailand, and if it is hot, it's more dry heat. So it's like, okay, this is way more favorable than Thailand, where it's like when it's 40 degrees Celsius and 100% humidity, you can't even go outside. So those are kind of the prospects right now. It just depends on how each of those countries accepts a United States citizen who isn't paying their tax, and that's the biggest equation at this point. So
yeah, we get a map of the world, guys, and we look at all the countries where PEDs are legal, and we throw a dart.
Yeah,
that's how we fucking
literally, literally, fucking right, dude. Yep, yeah, that's pretty much what I've done for my life these past like year and a half. What would you guys consider to be low FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone? Under 3?
Less than 1. Less than 1.
I'd say less than 1 is quite low. It's definitely inactivity. Zoomospermia under that. You get to pick 3 compounds for the rest of your life. What would you pick? Adam, you go first.
Easy. Test insulin GH.
Yeah, dude. You nailed it. That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay. Yeah, it's just the simple shit, man. It works so damn well. So damn well.
Back to IG, I think.
What's that?
I was going to say back to IG, unless you guys on YouTube.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, I was just scrolling through IG to look at questions. There's a lot of ones asking about people, not things. Okay. What would a cycle design look like for mast test GH? Any AI needed? It's a really interesting question. This guy is not a bodybuilder. He is actually, I think he's like a fighter or something.
Okay.
Anyways, well, cycle design for question was at the end of the day, cycle design. What would a cycle design look like for Masteron, testosterone, GH? Any AI needed? For me personally, I would design it in an orientation that is as much testosterone as you can tolerate. So titrations of testosterone up by 100 milligrams until you seemingly cannot tolerate that existing dose due to estrogenic side effects or something else. And then inclusion backing down probably another 100 milligrams from wherever that dose was. And then including Masteron to compensate for any milligrams needed for total milligram compensation to get equated effects that you want to achieve. And then, growth hormone is just, for me at this point, it's just how much can you afford, and that is how much you take. And usually you won't need an AI if you do it in this format.
Yes, I agree, as Kolton said, but it's a depends answer, man. Like, what level do you aromatize at? How much test are you taking? How are you going to titrate? Because as we all know, unless you do a set dose and never change it, there's probably going to be titration as well, which is going to affect the level of aromatization. So unfortunately, I mean, it sucks, but I feel like every time I answer, it's like, depends.
Yeah. And this is where we pitch our coaching. Adam is one of the most comprehensive coaches I know and is capable of helping people with that exact issue, that exact question. In fact, I guarantee you he does it on a daily basis, as well as myself. So you probably need a coach if you're asking something like that. Seth Green asks, gotta love this guy, lowest year-round dose for Methyltren. I don't think there is.
I've tried it, man, and it's fucking wild. I think I was in a steep caloric deficit in South Africa, and I can't remember the milligrams, unfortunately. To be honest, I probably just took one pill.
Yeah,
so anywhere from 10 to 50 milligrams. I can't remember. And my strength kept going up, but as did my blood pressure, as did the feed. I literally felt like I was poisoning myself, but god damn it, I felt wild in the gym. It's kind of a for fun compound, as as crazy as that sounds, because I generally just don't think you can use it sustainably long term. So it's kind of like experience. Maybe in rare cases, if you're like a powerlifter or strongman for like acute phase for like a show or something where you need like a crazy strength adaptation, sure. But for bodybuilders, fuck no, dude. You're just gonna injure yourself.
Yeah, 1000%. I took it too, thinking it was gonna be the brightest thing in the world. It was either Methyltren or it was like God, I can't remember. It was it was oral tren of some formulation, but I don't know if it was Methyltren or there was another thing I'm thinking about, but I can't remember what it's called. But I had the same situation. I think we talked about this before, but it wasn't necessarily strength gains rather than just like emotionally instability gains. You know, I was just fucking a weirdo. Okay, so Nigel White asks, he's from what's that country under Australia? Fuck.
New Zealand.
New Zealand. He's from New Zealand. Is it okay to put 3 compounds in the same barrel, which means syringe, and pin together, i.e., NPP, Masteron, and Testosterone?
Yes, and if you're Dr. Todd Lee, you'll fucking put everything in fucking one vial and just inject the entire
do a
thing.
one banger for the day. Yeah, water-based solution, oil-based solution, that shit don't matter. Fuck, there was oil in there too, man. Just get it all
yeah. Personally, I am happy to combine oils. So like anything that's suspended in oil. So as you said, NPP, testosterone, any anabolic, I don't mind mixing. Personally, I don't mix water-based compounds and oil-based compounds. I do them separately. But in terms of the anabolics, yeah, dude, go ahead, have fun, mix it all.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say there is just like a added cautionary warning is like just ensuring that each vial is clean. You know, when you're switching between drawing from each vial, make sure that the topper is cleaned, that you used an alcohol pad sometime recently. That way you're not causing cross-contamination, and you'll be good to go. And I agree with Adam. I don't mix my water-based stuff with oil-based stuff, but I think most people don't. Todd's just sort of a unique feature of the bodybuilding community at this point. So, okay, Okay, on GH for 4 months. Sleep benefits came immediately. Fullness in the past few weeks. Does it seem to be normal as far as timeline? Numb hands, arms, always, and I feel less anxious. So there's 2 primary effects that we get through any pharmaceutical intervention. It's genomic and non-genomic effects. Non-genomic effects are more immediate. They're more quick. It's what you feel when you take Anadrol and you go straight to train. Those are not things happening in the genome itself. It is quite literally the environment outside of the genome. You know, androgens binding to receptors and initiating some form of reaction that is non-nuclear. Those are the things that are often experienced when people start taking growth hormone immediately. Improvements in sleep, improvements in specifically improvements in like blood volume, or I guess pumps in the gym. I would say that people often experience the most benefit usually several weeks after starting. 4 to 8 weeks is where people are like, oh, I'm on growth hormone now. Like this is, you know, the it's not just the feeling, but it's the physical outward appearance of rounder shoulders, bigger traps, like, you know, swollen fucking fingers. Like those are the things that kind of take time. And those are the genomic effects. Those are the effects that you do see bone development in certain bodybuilders. You do see like the elbow bones start to protrude, like the architectural changes start to happen, which is what we're after. Obviously, we don't want our bones and shit to grow or our organs to grow. And I did a great video coming out on Dallas McCarver, and going through his autopsy. He had, you know, some of his organs were 3 times the size of a normal human's organ, not just his heart, but his lungs, his kidneys, his small intestine, like everything genuinely grew that much. That stuff takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. So that is my answer, I guess. It takes several weeks to get the genomic effects. You're going to get non-genomic effects within, you know, moments of, you know, a day or 2 of injecting growth hormone.
And also, here's me being cliche again, but like, it depends how much. Are you taking 2 IUs or are you taking 10? You know, for example, when I started using 2 IUs in Australia because it was butt fuck expensive, and to be honest, I'm still questioning if it was even real. Yeah, I did see improvements in sleep. I did see improvements, I guess, in fullness in terms of glycogen retention. Not too much else. Got to Thailand, ran 6 IUs. Holy fuck. I felt like I was getting bigger. I was getting basically staying the same level of body fat. My training performance increased in the sense that I could handle more training volume. And I was just eating more carbohydrates, and also my blood glucose started elevating. So yeah, it kind of depends, man. But those are typically the effects. And as Kolton was saying, with growth hormone, it's kind of you have to use it long term. Like when people tell me, "Oh, I'm doing a cycle of GH, but I'm going to do 8 weeks at like 5 IUs," I'm like, "The fuck?" I'm like, "No, dude. Like you need to kind of just use it almost year round if you can afford it, or at least for long periods of time to get the effects."
Yeah, growth hormones. I like to tell people who ask about it because everyone's like, for one, I think everyone has this delusion that in America, at least, growth hormones are very inexpensive now. It's $90 per 100 IUs, which is cheap comparably to everyone else in the world. And you can even get cheaper for those are like high quality ones that are, community gets sourced to them. But when it comes to using it, it is an investment, but it compounds. It's one of those investments that you kind of throw in and the Roth IRA and just kind of wait for fucking 20 years and see what happens.
Fuck
right?
Your Roth IRA, investing growth hormone.
Just that shit into growth hormone. That's the real Roth IRA, baby. The Roth GH, bro. And that's kind of what it is. It's like you start injecting the shit, and after several months, you're like, okay, like, whoa, this is different. And then months later, you're like, okay, like I'm getting even bigger, I'm getting even better. And it's just more of a much, with androgens, you get a much more acute response. You can tell when you're on and versus when you're off. Growth hormone, it takes some time for sure. It's not as volatile.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about the cost, and I've said this before, like people don't realize insulin, growth hormone, testosterone all have a synergistic effect. If you use them in combination, in my opinion, you will probably have less side effects. You'll probably grow more, which means less spending money on blood work, less spending money on ancillary medication, less spending money on titrating anabolics. And again, depending on how much you got the growth hormone for, you could probably end up doing a net calculation that would actually potentially result in it being cheaper. Because I've seen so many guys who won't run GH, who just like blast anabolics, get a fuckload of side effects, and then have to spend money on blood work, even medical consultations with me, consultations with a lot of people, getting ancillary medication. I'm like, dude, you could have used half of this, use a bit of growth hormone and insulin as needed, and you probably would have grown more with no issues. So just keep that in mind when you're like, oh, growth hormone's too much, I'm just going to blast anabolics. Like, think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You save money in the long term. That's the thing. Well, I am out of questions at the moment, so
we got one more
here. We got one more here. Shay Harlow. How and when should you titrate doses on a cut? That's a good question.
So I'll go with my take. So personally, I find the titrations on a cut much more infrequent than in a surplus phase for most individuals, because most of the time you can sort of find a dosage where you're going to retain most of your tissue. And unfortunately, I can't give you some scientific equation. I'm like, based on this, it's like I literally have to look at the individual, look at their level of development, look at their PED history, and then based on what I think will be an appropriate dose for them. Most individuals I find, unless they are like exorbitantly large, anywhere, if I'm just going to make up a number here, anywhere from like 250 to 500 milligrams total anabolics seems to be more than fine. Again, depends on the level of leanness. Like I said, you can do a 12-week cut and be on TRT and probably be fine. But if you're doing a contest prep, probably somewhere in that range. And personally, when I will titrate a dosage in a deficit period or do a contest prep, is when I notice that refeeds are not improving training performance. A deload has not improved training performance. And we're seeing regression. Okay, and obviously in a contest prep, I can't just increase food unless we have time for diet break. But in that period of time, I will make a dose titration. And usually what we'll see is that training performance will improve. They'll continue maintaining or even progressing a bit in terms of training performance. And that's basically how I take it, to sort of mitigate, because we know that our best proxy for muscle loss, at least in a contest prep, besides what we're visually seeing, okay, because you visually can't see, 200 grams or a kilogram of muscle loss. Like, I don't care how good your coach is, he has a fucking laser vision. Yeah. So our best proxy is going to be training performance. So if I see significant drops in training performance, and we've nailed nutrition, we've nailed, sleep hasn't been disrupted, trainings, all the other recovery modalities are in check, that's when I have a dose titration anywhere from 100 to 150 milligrams, depending on the individual. And then I'll look at training performance again. And when I see any drop like that, and I haven't had other variables adjusted, that's when I titrate it. So I guess on a cut, man, choose a dose which will maintain your performance. If you see your performance dropping significantly and you already have introduced refeeds, your rate of loss is not more than like 1.25% per week, your sleep is not shit, your hydration is good, you're not training like days back to back, you're not doing excess amount of volume, you're not killing yourself in the gym, if all that is in check, then titrate the dose. And as you just said, I just rattled off a long list of variables, because it's not like I see this increased dose. It's like, no, I look at this, this, and this. That's why here at Blood Board, like we have very comprehensive metric trackers. It's not just us plugging ourselves, but generally telling you what we do. I have comprehensive metric trackers where I look at all these variables: training performance, rates of loss, current, food intake. I have in our check-in forms, we have like recovery metrics. And I look at all these in conjunction to say, should we increase the dose? Because in a deficit phase, unless you're taking exorbitant amounts of PEDs, you're probably just maintaining your muscle mass, in which case you want to use the least to get the most result.
1000%. Yeah. I think it's a matter of exactly what you said. If you're getting fatigued and performance is dropping and you're just hemorrhaging strength, and recovery is not being mitigated by use of high days or even deloads, and it's just nothing's working, that's when you need to increase the dose. Obviously, prep is a time where we're under a time constraint as well. It's not like we have all of this time to sort of play with. So you have to be a little bit bullish sometimes. And if you're like, all right, I'm feeling pretty exhausted, I had a high carb day yesterday, still feeling pretty shit, I haven't touched the doses in 3 weeks, maybe we pull some things up and get rolling here. That might be fine. In the differences within an off-season setting, which you didn't touch on, but I think you meant it, is that in an off-season setting, we're looking for the scale to go up and performance to increase simultaneously with body composition maintaining the same. It is a linear scale. Like we're looking to go up, 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 up in weight and not come back down. And whereas prep, it's like, let's go down in weight and just maintain muscle as much as possible. More gear doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen better. It's just going to be greater side effects, and then at the end of the day, greater fatigue for you in a bodily system as a whole. Usually, most of your prep issues can be managed by a maintenance dose of, whatever you'd call like a maintenance cycle. For me, it's somewhere probably around, 500 milligrams where I could sustainably keep a lot of my muscle under aggressive cut, and then using nutrition in a very intricate manner, as well as deloads to improve fatigue and recovery when needed. I think 99% of the time, those are the variables that need to be looked at, not necessarily gear, especially when in the cut. But again, I won't be afraid of saying you do need to be bullish with increasing the gear, because we only have those 3 variables: eat less, move more, and take more gear. So, yeah.
And here's a bit of actually a controversial one. I'm interested in your opinion on Kolton. In a contest prep, in my opinion, in the initial phases, I'm going to make up a number here, 4 to 6 weeks when food hasn't dropped significantly. Again, depends on the contest prep. If you're doing like a shotgun prep, 12 weeks or some shit, and you have to do it drastically. No, but let's say a longer contest prep where you've come into prep relatively lean, it's 16 to 20 weeks. I actually find that you can actually, in the start of prep, either increase or keep androgens relatively high, because I still think you can actually potentially still build a bit of muscle mass with positive body recompositioning, where you're only in a slight deficit, training motivation is high, fatigue is low. So often I find with individuals, we almost right off the off season into the first 6 weeks of prep, keeping androgens the same, do a deload, maybe like 6 weeks into prep. We're also like, as well as a mini diet break, I reduce androgens to what I think their base level is to retain muscle mass, and then only titrate later on. So that if I were to do a graph of what their like dosages look like, it's like, titrating during an off-season phase, start prep, hold it for 6 weeks, drop to what I think will maintain their muscle mass, keep it at that, and then only titrate, as needed during the prep phase. And that's actually a slightly different way that I approach contest preps. And it seems to work quite well, where, again, I can't say, hey, we did DEXA scan at multiple points, but most of my athletes, I think, literally do grow in that 6 week period, especially when you're using like instant growth hormone and anabolics, which have a synergistic effect.
It's funny. I do agree with you. Sometimes in the world of bodybuilding, you'll have issues where the timelines just don't work out, and you'll have to have someone run one cycle straight into the back of the next cycle. And those are the instances where I kind of like to do that, where the off-season cycle wasn't as long as we'd like it to be. So maybe it was like 10 weeks, 12 weeks. So we just moved straight into a prep, and then you increase the doses sort of towards that latter end of the off-season into the transition. And then you sort of have this higher dose of androgens. Usually people start performing better when they start a cut. They start getting more aggressive in the gym. They start feeling less fatigued and lethargic. They start digesting food better. And so now you kind of have this synergy of all these positive emotions and feelings interacting with the higher doses of androgens and or growth hormone and whatever else. And then suddenly now, when you come to that deload point, which you're talking about, what I typically do But this is for high level athletes. This isn't like, this is more postulation for what I do for guys who are like 240 pounds extra or whatever. But is I take out what we were using and implement more short acting compounds. So now we can manipulate variables on a much more faster pace. So it's like, okay, input this, take this out. And especially for peaking, it's like, okay, now we can sort of play with these variables. We'll have these background androgens that'll still be in play because they're going to be in serum for the next 5 or 6 weeks. And peak week is 6 weeks from now or whatever. But now we can start to tweak things really quickly with like smaller doses of trenbolone acetate and smaller doses of Masteron propionate and orals and things like that. And so you kind of get that unique benefit as well.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Unfortunately, the reality of the short acting stuff is usually people just buy this shit beforehand. And it's like, oh, do you have short esters too? And it's like,
yeah,
no.
Yeah.
But I have to agree with you. If all things all considered, perfect world, yeah, I like that approach too. Swapping from a longer ester, short ester approach, you get more immediate results of a greater effect. You can manipulate it more accurately because people don't realize when you have like, you know, a 7 to 14 day half-life with, or even a longer than that, dude, you're not going to see results for a period of time.
Yeah. Like a lot of coaches, I shouldn't talk shade, but because I do it myself sometimes, but a lot of coaches will make like a gear change in 3 weeks. And it's like, like, okay. I mean, like there's definitely a notable change in what we've been taking, but we're still not seeing the full effect of the doses that have changed for a solid 2 more weeks, man. So like, let's maybe consider what we're doing here more. And especially like I said, in prep, you don't have a lengthy amount of time where you can like liberally just sort of like do what you want and wait for things and be more patient. You kind of have to go fast. So those short acting compounds can be beneficial. However, I will say for most people, I don't think they're necessary. It's more so for the guys who are looking for that extra 10% and have, this is so critical, have enough muscle mass to be like representative on stage, not just starting their bodybuilding career. So
I agree.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, that is all I got for today. I think that was a pretty solid Q&A, guys. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I really appreciate you. As always, you guys can find us in the links down below or on Instagram. We post content daily on Instagram, as well as try to provide as much insight as possible in the DMs. And we both coach. Adam works with me and for himself in his own capacity. Both of us very capable coaches. I won't lie, my roster is extremely full right now for what I'm capable of doing. So Adam is hands down your guy, and someone that you definitely, if you need a coach, he might not have 100,000 followers. He might not have, you know, 1 billion athletes or whatever that are genetically gifted. And he just had through a selection bias because he coached one IFBB pro and then they all came to him. But he knows what the fuck he's doing. So that is true.
Thanks, guys. I'm running a discount on genetically gifted athletes. So if you are African American, 280 pounds lean, I will coach you.
If you're 290 pounds and 6'2", DM us. We have some options for you. It's very
and I will take all the credit and claim like it was my fucking protocol which got you your pro card when you just walked on stage. And God.
Oh fuck, man. All right. Well, I'll talk to you later. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Take care, guys.